it's definitely not like a race. You don't just kind of do it all overnight. It's more of a marathon, and you just keep going, keep learning, keep trying.
Do you ever have so many questions and no one to ask, so they're just wasting away on Google searches you'll forget about in an hour or so?
We had that same problem, and that's why we created the RD2BE podcast, a resource for dietetic and nutrition students looking for answers that their peers don't have.
We are students Macy and Emily and registered dietitian Carl Barnes. We engage in conversations and learn from RDs.
Join us weekly as we gain insight into the unique journeys of registered dietitians all over the country.
Welcome back to another week of the RD2BE podcast. I'm your registered dietitian host, Carl Barnes. This is our weekly podcast where we sit down with a different awesome registered dietitian each week to showcase the diversity of opportunity in the profession and hope to help RD2Bs identify either areas in the profession that they never knew existed or inspire future career choices. So very excited to be sitting down with Danielle Gaffen today. Super excited to learn more about your niche. She is a Crohn's and colitis dietitian and really excited to learn more. Thanks so much for being here. I'll pass it off to Jenna to kick it off.
And I'm Jenna, your RD2BE. And so Danielle, could you give us a little background into your dietetics journey? Like what made you decide to become an RD, how you pursued it, your educational background, all that jazz?
Yes, of course. My interest in nutrition grew after college when my mom developed 3 perforations in her colon after taking pain meds and steroids for a really rare autoimmune reaction she developed, transverse myelitis. But from complications of that disease, she needed 1 foot of her distal ileum removed and 1 foot of her proximal colon removed, so 2 feet of her intestines taken out. And she wound up with an ileostomy that was ultimately reversed after 6 months. But even on total parenteral nutrition, she lost 55 pounds and developed malnutrition. And I was her primary caregiver for 2 years during that time. It couldn't see how powerful nutrition played a role in her survival, let alone her well-being. And my interest in gut health increased when I met my now husband, who has Crohn's disease. He's a 6 foot tall guy, and he weighed 127 pounds at his lowest due to symptoms of the disease. He literally became afraid to eat because he associated all foods with pain, diarrhea, and discomfort. And he also struggled with complications like iron and vitamin B12 deficiency. But since we've been together, I'm proud to report that he's gained a healthy amount of weight to feel better and have enough energy to make it through the day, because we were able to learn which foods actually did cause him digestive issues, and then focus more on the foods that made him feel good while making sure he was getting the appropriate nutrition, the macros and micronutrients he needed. And slowly but surely, we removed the fear and anxiety from eating, and he now weighs a much more normal weight for him, 185 pounds. But really understanding the link between nutrition and gut disease prompted me to obtain my master's degree in nutritional sciences, become an RD, and ultimately specialize for nutrition for people with inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. But I'm happy to take a few steps back and share a little bit more about my education and experience. The college I went to, Rice University, was really small, so sadly nutrition wasn't even a major there. I was pre-med at the time and majored in kinesiology and theater, kind of a random combination there. But as you can see, I did not become a doctor and realized I wanted to become an RD. So after I realized that, I needed to concurrently complete my master's and also the DPD program if I wanted to become an RD. Long story short, I graduated from both programs about a year and a half ago. And when I graduated there, applied for the fall match and ended up matching to Utah State University's distance dietetic internship program and matched to that program. And I graduated from that internship about a year and a half ago and studied for my RD exam and became a dietitian. So Since becoming a dietitian, I've been trying to keep a little bit busy. During grad school, I worked for a company called Healthy Dining, which is a nutritional analysis company that has since transitioned to more of a nutrition tech company. I was then really honored when they gave me a job right after I became a dietitian. But then I became a per diem clinical dietitian at my local hospital. And that means that I was sort of an as needed dietitian, sort of like a part-time, but a little bit more flexible than that, as needed. And then I had volunteered at that hospital during grad school and completed my clinical internship rotation there. And then when they needed a per diem dietitian, they hired me. But what I'm super excited to tell you more about today is that I started a virtual private practice during the pandemic called Eat Well Crohn's Colitis. So now I'm a full-time virtual private practice dietitian.
Awesome. And it was really cool how, like, what made you decide to become an RD? Because I think a lot of RD2Bs, like nutrition students, they have a very personal connection towards becoming an RD. Like, we are a very giving profession, and we really just want to help everyone out there. And definitely with autoimmune disorders, autoimmune diseases, anything under that category, like my mom, she has an IBD, she has IBS, all that. And so when it comes to those and linking it to nutrition, being successful about it in of itself is super hard. And like definitely working around different patients and everything, like even with your mom and your husband, like all of those, super awesome, super awesome. And so when you did your dietetic internship at Utah State, it's super awesome to talk about how you used RD2BE as a resource, and you were in the mentorship program. And so because your initial undergrad degree wasn't really in nutrition, how did RD2BE specifically with your dietetic internship kind of help you like reach your steps as becoming a registered dietitian, because you didn't really have the traditional undergraduate like preparation?
Great question. I was actually a part of the trial launch of the dietetic mentorship program during my dietetic internship. And it was really exciting to be a part of that program because it really gave me an opportunity to engage with an RD in a more informal setting, which seemed like a more candid environment where I could really ask the dirty questions I wanted to and see what it was really like on a day-to-day basis to work in certain areas of our field. I found it much more valuable than trying to ask questions in more traditional academic or work settings. So definitely 2 thumbs up for the program. When I was in my dietetic internship too, it was kind of a weird, uncertain time during the pandemic, during COVID. And so I felt like that really provided me with the time to think critically about the topics we were talking about in the program, kind of seeing how the future would be different after the pandemic and kind of where the writing was on the wall in certain areas of the field. So I really felt at the end of the program, I had a better sense of what I wanted to do, and really all thanks to my mentor. So I got lucky.
Well, that's really awesome to hear. And I'm sure because you have a virtual private practice now, definitely with how the pandemic has shifted the way that medical care happens, I'm for sure the face-to-face online has definitely played a role in how you're reaching your patients. And so because you didn't have the traditional undergraduate DPD program, you did your DPD courses along with your MS degree. Would you say that it was more rigorous than just your traditional MS degree you would do right after your undergraduate DPD, or would you say that they balanced it pretty well?
Ooh, such a good question. While there was a good balance completing those 2 programs at the same time, I did find it a really challenging time in my life. And I think there were a few reasons why it felt challenging for me. One was I needed to work part-time throughout my entire time in school. So then it was like, okay, school two programs and work. I also, weird timing, got married my first semester of the program. So that was another life stress. And I had some family obligations too. So long story short, I did decide to extend the amount of time to complete my programs. I opted to take an extra semester just so I could go a little bit slower in my pace. So instead of trying to accomplish those two programs in 2 years, I did both in 2.5 years.
And I think that's an awesome takeaway that I think students should really take, is that if you're overwhelmed, especially doing two programs at once, working a part-time job, having, personal family obligations, and then 6 other things on the list, you're a human, and you sometimes need to take a breath of fresh air. And so I do think, and I mean, I'm a culprit to this as well. It's just grind culture, just go, 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 don't stop until you're finished, that whole thing. But it's just kind of taking a step back and realizing, wait, it's okay. I can take a breather, take it just extra semester to space things out, because life, it's not a race to the finish line. It's just, you want to make sure you make it out there alive and everything. And so, especially with what you did and everything, that's awesome. And really just the whole congratulations to doing two programs at once. That's insane. And also with the distance program. And so with the Utah State distance program, I feel like a lot of not interns, but RD2B's nutrition students, the idea of a distance program is very it's very attractive, because flexibility, you get to figure out where you want to go, what's in your location. It's very cost effective because you can live with someone else and all that. But it's also daunting at the same time, because you have to choose your preceptors. You have to man the ship and figure out your entire dietetic internship pretty much. And so when it came to you making the decision to do a distance internship, what made you decide to do a distance internship?
Yes, there were two main reasons why I considered a distance DI program. One was that the location. I needed to stay in San Diego because my family's here, and there weren't any San Diego specific programs participating in the fall match that I needed. So what I mean by that is that some programs only offer their internship rotation to start in either the spring or the fall. Usually most of them are spring starts. So you'll remember that extra semester I tacked on at the end. It meant that I was graduating in the fall, so in December. So it meant that I was suddenly applying to the fall match if I didn't want to wait for the spring match and lose a little bit more time. So I talked to my DPD director at the time about my situation, how I needed to stay in San Diego where I live, where my family is, but I wasn't eager to wait. So we figured a good compromise could be to apply to a distance program available for fall match. And we figured worst case scenario, if I didn't match, then I just would wait for spring anyways. But then I matched, so it kind of all worked out. If my situation was different, would I have felt strongly one way or the other, distance versus in person? I'm not sure. Sometimes I think about it. It was a pain in the butt to set up my own rotations and find my own preceptors. I think anyone who doesn't tell you that may not be telling you the full truth. It was a little bit tough, but I was pleasantly surprised by how organized my distance dietetic internship was. At Utah State University, it was not their first rodeo. They had been helping interns from a distance for decades. And so it was like a well-oiled machine. So I felt like I had a lot of support in my particular program. My director was wonderful and ended up being a really strong mentor for me. So even though I was, probably 2,000 miles away, I didn't feel like I was at a disadvantage.
That's awesome to hear. And I think that's honestly music to some interns, not, I keep on saying interns, but nutrition students, because like, I guess a lot of them think that it's all, the entire ball is in their court. They have to decide everything. But like, even though a distance internship is a distance internship, they still have the curriculum, they have everything, all the resources to give you to do that. And so when it came, and you said that it was difficult, you know, finding the rotations, finding the preceptors and everything. And so could you just give us, I guess, like your perspective as to how you were able to find those specific sites, how you organized figuring out what rotation to choose, how to find a preceptor, you know, all the things that not a lot of students hear about when they are approached about distance internships?
Excellent question. If you can, start making relationships and contacts early. I think where I succeeded over some of my peers applying at the same time was that I started sort of planting the seeds for where future rotations could be sooner than they did. So for example, in San Diego, at least, we're super saturated with interns, with dietitians, and it can be very challenging here, at least, to find a clinical rotation. So competitive that I volunteered at my hospital, of course, to see what a hospital was really like, see if I liked the environment, but so that that hospital could become familiar with me, learn my name, see who I was, see that I wasn't a serial killer, so that when the time came where I needed those supervised hours, they remembered me and they were familiar with me and were eager to help me on my journey. Whereas I have a good friend who hospitals aren't her thing, which is totally okay. Plenty of other jobs for dietitians out there, but because she didn't have that, she actually couldn't find a hospital rotation when it came time to get one, and really had to kind of scramble for what was possible. So if you can find opportunities to volunteer, A, to gain exposure to that environment, but B, to kind of set you up for success, the more of those seeds you can plant, the better. For some of my other rotations, my particular DPD program had like a field trip class where we went out in the field and met some dietitians who were in unique environments, different areas. And don't be afraid to ask those people if you can connect and learn more about them and see if they're open to taking interns. One of my rotations, I just asked, after meeting that person in the field trip class, hey, do you ever take interns? And if so, would you be open to learning more about me and seeing if I'm a good fit to go here? So I'm a little bit shy and reserved, and that was hard for me to assert myself in my situation, but a lot of RDs are eager to help you on your journey. You just need to ask.
Awesome. And I think this is also a really great place to kind of mention what you're doing with your current private practice, how you're accepting interns. And so are you able to kind of go in depth about how you're willing to be, you know, like how you were on that, the side of the student asking people if you could be an intern for them? Like, how have you shifted that perspective towards where you're the one that wants to give the resources, the opportunities to potential interns?
Yes, because I'm a newer dietitian, I think the trauma is still pretty familiar with me. I still remember that, you know, what a pain it was to try and get the rotations and hours. And for me, with the pandemic and the timing of my rotation, it added an extra layer of craziness because I went through all that work to set up all my distance rotations. And then 6 weeks into my first rotation at a public school, the pandemic started. And not only was that school shut down, dismissed, that rotation ended abruptly for me, but all my other rotations fell through. So that was tough. So then I was scrambling again to see, well, gosh, during a pandemic, who's going to take me and can help me achieve my hours? So I remember it's tough. And so I'm eager to help others get their hours. And also now in a private practice setting, I'm excited not only to help people get their hours and achieve their competencies required, but I think there are a lot of really cool tools and platforms that RDs, especially in private practice, use now that aren't taught in the classroom. Of course, in the classroom, we learn the MNT, we learn the book stuff, very valuable, of course. But for example, I'm eager to teach interns more about how my HIPAA secured virtual patient portal works and allow interns to shadow my counseling sessions. I think it's valuable to teach interns about SEO, search engine optimization, and sort of the tools you can use to pretty much get found on Google ranking more easily. So like Keywords Anywhere and TubeBuddy. I think it's really, really necessary for future RDs to know how to learn Canva, which is like an intuitive graphic design platform to create social media graphics and handouts, or using like That Clean Life or another recipe database like the one I use that makes it really easy to pick out appropriate recipes and customize clients' recipes based on MNT recommendations or make meal plans. So I think there's as dietitians, there's always a lot to learn. It's always a learning journey as nutrition changes, as we learn more, but I think it's exciting to just be able to pay it forward to the next group and just have people continue to grow. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think especially not only is the dietetics, when we say the dietetics profession is a very giving profession, it's on both the professional RD side, but also the student intern side, because you have, whether you're a freshman or sophomore undergraduate or you're a dietetic intern, you see so many like students just kind of rushing to volunteer, to kind of go and get those opportunities to not only, build the resume, but also get that experience. And so with you accepting interns kind of into your private practice online setting, is it for distance interns trying to fill in their rotations, or is it just interns across the board?
Great question. I will say that for a virtual private practice rotation, oftentimes that can align well with like if interns are allowed an elective rotation, that can fit in really nicely. During the pandemic, several programs have been a little bit more lenient on traditional rotations. For example, I had one intern who even fulfilled part of her MNT competency through sort of private practice and counseling. That one, I'm not so sure how lenient that will stay as we maybe normalize and return back to kind of previous times, but wherever an intern thinks it can fit within their program, I'm eager to help accommodate that. I've talked to like directors of programs too, just to make sure everything's kosher and we're above board. But I think in the past where it seems to fit well is like an elective rotation.
Awesome, yeah. And so with your private practice, we kind of want to get some more information about that, not only for kind of, you've mentioned before how it's geared towards colitis, IBD, that realm, and why you decided to pursue that niche of dietetics, but kind of just for nutrition students and also us to know, like, what made you decide to start a private practice and kind of the foundation behind that, so that we can get a little feel of if an intern was interested, what they would see kind of the backbone to be.
Sure, absolutely. To be honest with you, I'm 99% certain that I never would have started a private practice if it wasn't for the pandemic. One of the big reasons was really when all of my internship rotations fell through. My internship wasn't quite sure what to do with us for a few weeks. At first, they tried to continue our learning by taking like continuing education courses or getting supervised practice hours through like self-guided study. But one of those options that was interesting that I took just because I was eager to get more hours was taking a 6-hour webinar on how to build a virtual nutrition website and kind of which components of SEO or search engine optimization to pay attention to, what hosting platform to choose for your website. It was kind of intense. But right after that, my internship director kind of hooked me up with a virtual private practice dietitian as a preceptor. And I had kind of a mixed experience with that rotation, but I did have the really incredible opportunity to counsel a client long-term. I worked with the client for 8 sessions and I liked it a lot, kind of more than my other rotations before and after that. And so between those two things, I started to become a little bit more interested in it. I really realized that being a virtual private practice dietitian would resolve a lot of the reservations I had about private practice in general. For example, I wouldn't have to pay the cost prohibitive rent for a brick and mortar practice. Or suddenly people were embracing telehealth during the pandemic. So really I could increase my potential client pool to anyone in the United States, as long as I paid certain licensure fees to some states that require it. So yeah, my internship director, having worked with me pretty closely by then, encouraged me to grow and reach my full potential. And she saw my curiosity, I think, in that area and really encouraged me strongly to consider starting a professional social media account during my internship and coming up with a business name and just kind of getting started. And I appreciated her push, even though I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, because I got started and I did end up changing my mind and going in a different direction for a niche later. But I think that's what being a business owner is all about. So yeah, if you can get started, create a professional social media account, even, you know, at this point in your journey, wherever you are, I think it's a good start.
Awesome. And also, you've mentioned a couple of times when you were doing your dietetic internship, you started it right when the pandemic just kind of hit everyone in the face. And so I'm sure that was very stressful and a very stressful, high pressure situation. And then not even to mention like deciding to start a private practice so early, early on into when you just wanted to become a registered dietitian. And so I guess for nutrition students and also just kind of overcoming those types of obstacles, what things did you do or like what things did you add to your toolkit to kind of help you overcome those things? Because working through a pandemic and also deciding to start a private practice during these times, it was probably really difficult. And so like what things did you do to kind of help you overcome those?
Great question. I think before that time, I never really realized that I was a perfectionist. I don't know about you guys. I know that's a common trait in our field and with people going into the field, but I think my perfectionist tendencies have prevented me from ever getting started in a lot of different areas of my life. And it's a problem because when you want to do something, you just have to start. So when kind of thinking about starting a private practice, I just started to think of and kind of adopt Nike's slogan or Shia LaBeouf, his saying that, but just do it. you don't have to be perfect. You can learn and improve as you go. But if you can just start, just do it, you're golden. And it's so hard. Just posting my first social media professional profile post took me weeks just to press the post button. But it's really worth it if you can just do it, and things get easier with time. And it's definitely not like a race. You don't just kind of do it all overnight. It's more of a marathon, and you just keep going, keep learning, keep trying.
Yeah, and I think that's an awesome key takeaway for a lot of nutrition students, because I mean, I know that I'm definitely one where we kind of want to make sure everything's perfect before we also do anything about moving it forward. And so kind of, cycling back, it's not a race, it's not a rush. Rome wasn't built in a day. And so also just the key tidbits, even the little things that you said with like, starting a professional social media thing as a student, that can really build, that can honestly in today's day and age be a portfolio, like part of your portfolio, how people recognize you. If you're interested in a distance internship, how you get preceptors because they see how proactive you are, how out there you are in a virtual setting. But how you do that is by doing it, like just like what you said, just biting the bullet, doing it, because honestly, half of the energy is just picking up and actually deciding to do it, because I think a lot of students, they struggle with deciding to actually push and motivate themselves to get there. But thank you so much for joining us, and it was super awesome talking to you about your your educational experience, your professional experience, what you're doing in the dietetics profession. And I really hope that some nutrition students decide to take up your interning positions, because especially in this COVID virtual world, I think it would be a really awesome experience for them. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your wonderful questions and for having me on this podcast.